You're listening to A Slice of Therapy with me, Alun Parry. So my house alarm is there obviously to protect my house, and so when it judges that it's under attack, the alarm goes off. And it's not particularly nice when the alarm goes off. It's this high-pitched siren sound of the kind that you've no doubt heard before. And so when it does this, it always takes me by surprise. It is, as the name would suggest, it's pretty alarming. And it always takes me by surprise because it happens completely independently of me. It never consults me before it triggers that alarm sound. It just does it. And sometimes it does it because there's a genuine threat, there's a potential burglar, and so it sounds the alarm. But sometimes it does it because it's the neighbour's cat has just walked across the threshold, and then this alarm goes off, this high-pitched sound. And either way, it's the alarm that decides. It decides to make that sound by itself, and then I have to respond to it. Now, in our bodies, we also have a similar alarm system. And in the same way, that's very sensitive to threat as well. And again, just like the house alarm, it will respond independently. It won't consult you first. It'll just activate, and it'll do it right away. And its responses are alarming as well. It has a whole host of responses. Obviously, it's not a high siren sound, but still, responses that are very powerful and that are very shocking will happen in the body. Now, sometimes it'll do that because there's a genuine threat, which, of course, is really, really useful. But a lot of the time it does it because there is something in the present which resembles a genuine threat from long ago. And so you're not actually in any danger in the here and now, but it resembles something that was traumatic from some time ago. And because that resemblance is there, and because it's so sensitive to threat, the alarm system goes off. And so suddenly our bodies are feeling all sorts of things from nowhere, completely out of the blue, it seems, because our body's alarm system is responding to something that in reality is in the past. And so just like the house alarm suddenly has all these high-pitched sounds that kind of hijack the house in that moment, we're also then suddenly in the grip, when our body does this, of a very powerful set of physical responses that's our body's equivalent to that house alarm's high-pitched siren sound. And it can be helpful to know what that is for you, because when our body's alarm systems triggers, different things will happen to us. And even though we've all got a similar alarm system in there, it's our nervous system that's responding in this way, it's going to be different for everyone. But nonetheless, examples of these sudden alarmed responses are things like a shortness of breath, or sweating, or feeling sick, or blushing and going really red, or just suddenly crying completely out of your control, or maybe an inability to talk as the throat closes up, or an inability to move as you notice that your limbs have just frozen solid, or an ability to think as your mind begins to go blank, or even that it starts to race, or your heartbeat increases, or you feel dizzy, or you have just this desire to run away or escape, or even a desire to lash out and fight. Or maybe it's the opposite and there's a draining of energy. Maybe there's a sinking feeling in the stomach. Maybe everything starts to feel heavy. Maybe there's a desire to hide away and not be seen, and many, many more. These are just examples of these kind of bodily alarm systems that activate whenever the body thinks there is a threat. Now, all of these are a really strong and really powerful bodily response to feeling less than safe. And they're so powerful that it can feel like the body and ourselves are being hijacked in that moment. Whether that be the panic of anxiety or whether that be the shutdown of depression. And so, as long as these responses happen, change can feel really difficult. Even when we develop good strategies, even when we think through what would be a good course of action, they can help, but we're always fighting the response of our own body's alarm system. If ever you felt panicked in an argument, for example, you'll know how hard it is, even if you know them, to use communication techniques in the middle of one of these spikes. It's really, really difficult because, like the house alarm, these responses happen to us. Our nervous system acts independently, and it does that in a bid to protect us as fast as it can. It's actually useful that it does that if there was an actual threat. But when it does that, not because of a problem right now, but because of a trauma response that is still being carried by us, then obviously it gets in our way rather than serve us. So the question then is, how do we actually remove that powerful response that is no longer useful because it's tied to something in the past that is actually now impacting us in a really negative way? How do we calm that alarm system so that you can live differently, so that you can make choices where you're in control rather than that feeling of being hijacked? Well, the answer to that is in a process which is called memory reconsolidation. And this is a relatively recent neuroscientific discovery. I'm talking the last couple of decades. And it's so new actually that even many therapists aren't aware of memory reconsolidation, and even if they aren't necessarily sure yet how to apply it. But what it does is it allows you to overwrite that old alarm system. And so it allows your nervous system to respond to what's actually happening in the now, rather than this trauma alarm that keeps on hijacking you. Now, my favourite way to do this, because it's a quick way of doing it, is to harness the power of your imagination. And it's a really powerful, effective approach that I consistently see my clients are transformed. And it's if by a miracle, because these responses simply don't happen anymore once this has been applied. And to be honest, as the therapist, it's even incredible to me, even though I know how it works and why it works, to see the transformation of someone in the grip of these hijacked responses to having their alarm system calmed is something that looks like a miracle even to me, despite the fact that I know why it works. And so let's have a recap on that then, because we looked at this example of the house alarm and how it sends off this powerful high-pitched siren sound. And sometimes it's true that it will do that with a burglar, but it will also do that with next door's cat. And our bodies have a similar alarm system which sends off these very, very powerful responses that feel like it's kind of hijacking us in the moment. And again, sometimes it will do that if it's a genuine threat, but a lot of the time it's a really old trauma response. And the fact that it's doing that in the here and now is not useful to us, and it hijacks our body and gets in our way. It kind of takes us away, in a sense, from our real selves into this sort of hijacked, panicked or depressed responses. And we saw, didn't we, that there was a whole host of these different kind of bodily alarm system responses that you might experience, whether that be shortness of breath or sweating or going red or sudden crying or the throat closing over and being unable to talk, or an increased heartbeat, or a desire to run away and escape, or to lash out, or even the opposite where it goes heavy and you have a drain of energy and a desire to get away and not be seen, and a whole host more than that as well. And so if these things are happening to you, that's an example of your body's alarm system doing what my house alarm does with the siren sound. Except you don't have a siren sound, you have all these sort of responses instead that feel like they're hijacking you. And so when that's happening and you're not in a position of actual danger in the here and now, that's a good example of a trauma response in some way. And we saw that the way that we can actually deal with this, so that you can actually access some of the strategies and choices that you would make differently if you were in full executive control, is something called memory reconsolidation, which is a process that allows you to overwrite that old alarm response so that you're much calmer and in control instead. And of course, like I said, my favourite way is to harness the amazing power of imagination so that you can actually transform from a place of trauma response to one where it's actually eradicated. And so you can be in a similar situation and those old trauma responses that feel so out of control are no longer happening. So if you find this useful, please spread it along so someone else can get the benefit as well. If you'd like to work with me directly, I'm Alun Parry. You can find out more at liverpoolpsychotherapy.co.uk. And don't worry if you're not in the local area, because I do work by video and telephone as well. And feel free to subscribe to the podcast. It's completely free and it means that you'll never miss an episode again. So thanks very much for listening, and I'll see you again on the next one.